I am Ian Rude, and this is my final project. Stereotypes and misrepresentations of American Indian people are very common, and many people struggle with how to challenge these ideas. For me, art is a great way to challenge them just because you can have your main message right up front, but then behind it, you can also put smaller objects or language the language can make it humorous, and the smaller objects can just send subliminal messages to the reader or the viewer. And with that, art is often less controversial than other forms of rhetoric to uh, resolve these misconceptions. And one artist I believe does a great job of this is Frank Buffalo Hyde. So Frank Buffalo Hyde is the artist that does my art piece, and he grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, as part of the Onondaga Beaver Clan. Uh, then, as he was growing up, he moved to New York City for a little bit, but now he lives back in Northfield, Minnesota, right across the bridge. Hyde was born with one arm and one leg. His father was in Vietnam and contracted Agent Orange, so he has that birth defect. But Frank Buffalo Hyde grew up idolizing Fritz Skolder because he really believed that Skolder's message in his paintings that American Indian people need to be represented accurately in art. He believed that that was very powerful, and you can see in some of his paintings that Hyde uses the same techniques that Skolder did. They both use majorly plain backgrounds and use lots of contrast in their colors to help make their images stand out. Hyde also drew inspiration from his father. His dad was also an artist. His dad was more known for his sculptures, though, rather than his paintings, but he was still able to introduce Hyde to the paintings at a young age. His father's sculptures are so well known and so popular that they've even been displayed at the Smithsonian Museum. On this slide, I just have a side by side of a Fritz Skolder painting and a Frank Buffalo Hyde painting. And with them put right next to each other, you can really see just the similarities that there are. They both have a very plain background, even though the Hyde one does have a little bit of a horizon background behind the main image. They're very similar and both use colors that really make their main image stand out, and they're just very detailed in their paintings as well. My chosen art piece is Virtual Sovereignty 4 by Frank Buffalo Hyde. It was painted in 2017 as the final piece of his Virtual Sovereignty project. I've put two other paintings from that project in this as well. This is one of his Virtual Sovereignty projects there, and then this is one of his other Virtual Sovereignty paintings. Uh, but I chose this one just because I believe that the fourth one just capped it off very well, and I think that this was my favorite of all of them. By 2017, Native American people have been pushed off of the land that they once lived in, and they've been forced to live the way that non native people wanted them to live, and they're often still thought of as dumb savages, and Hyde wanted to combat that thought with this virtual sovereignty project. In this piece, Hyde does use a bit more of a detailed background than in many of his other paintings. He uses a two color striped pattern in the back, and he did this because he didn't want to distort the image. Uh, but you can see that front and center there's an American Indian person with their traditional headdress on, as well as beaded necklace, which are both very common in the American Indian culture. But what's different is that they have the virtual reality goggles, similar to all of the paintings in this project, that are just showing that they have been able to adapt with the technology. Down in the bottom of the painting, though, there's an abstract shape that uh, Hyde liked to use a lot. He used lots of abstract shapes, but written inside of the shape is the word sovereign, which is part of where the name for the project comes from. But that shape, after looking at other pieces of his artwork, you can interpret it to be a buffalo, which in this culture represents lots of unity, leadership, and strength to the Onondaga Beaver clan. When you take this piece at just a surface level, you could think that it means that American Indian people are changing with the times and they're able to use technology, and that's great. But when you take in the details of the painting that he's brought out and the different backgrounds and contexts that other people could see, you could see that an outsider perspective would say that they are unhappy with the forced assimilation that they've had and that they've been forced to change their ways. And you can see that with the virtual reality goggles right in the face, just because those have been, they have had the non-native culture put right in their face, and then the unhappy expression on the person's face is also very powerful in that sense. But then an insider perspective would say to find unity and strength even though they have been uh, forced to assimilate with them, and that's just where the buffalo piece comes in, because you're taking in that symbol that has told them to be strong and told them to unite with everybody else. This piece has done a great job incorporating some of our course themes, but to actually see them, see some of them, you have to look past the surface level to get the deeper meaning. Stereotypes are shown in this just because they're wearing your stereotypical American Indian regalia with the headdress and the necklaces. But then it's also fighting back against the stereotype of the American Indian people not being able to use technology. There's survivance because it's showing that the American Indian people have been able to change with the times and keep up. But then artwork in itself is also survivance just because they display it and show the accurate representations of American Indian people, as well as Frank Buffalo Hyde's paintings being a bigger example because he sells them and spreads them. He sells them for relatively cheap just so that more people get them and more people display them. Uh, Resistance is shown just because the American Indians uh, are shown in this painting to be able to use the technology resisting that stereotype. And then it resembles identity as well. It has the American Indian person right front and center in their traditional regalia, which is just showing that there's pride in their identity. My takeaways from this project are just that art is a very powerful way to go about resisting the misrepresentations of American Indian people, but it's also helped me understand that different backgrounds and different contexts will really help with the interpretation of paintings.